Ashay, welcome to another episode of Educeumm. My name is Chy'Na Nellon. I am your host, and I have with me my wonderful friend and guest, Ryan D. Davis. As soon as the stuff happened with Kamala, I called my mom. Of course, that's my first text. You know what I'm saying? And she was like, "Is this fake news?" I was like, "I don't think so, Mama. This is from a real news outlet." And then I was like, "Oh,
From
who will
real
know
news
what it
outlet.
a real news outlet, right? Not like the Red Wire or something. This is
Right.
from legit, you know what I'm saying, news outlet. And then like within the hour, everybody else started posting as well. And so I was like, who am I gonna call? Right? Ryan D. Davis. Yes. Yes. Right. I said, who has been keeping up? I said, because I'm just gonna be honest, it was Trump and Biden. I was just like, oh, I'm in Arkansas. Okay. All right.
Right. Right.
Okay, I'm just gonna watch what happens. But then, and I'm still in Arkansas. You know what I'm saying? I'm not. It's not necessarily a pendulum swing, but numbers make a difference. You know what I'm saying? Things of that nature. So there's a few things that I just wanted to ask Ryan about. Oh, why? That's a good question because I didn't give any introduction. I just started talking because Ryan D. Davis is the man when it comes to politics. I say, always been in my ear. I've known Ryan since college, right? And he always instilled in us, even at a young age, when much younger. Like he always knew, like politics. When you need to, like when we were ignoring it, right? Also, Ryan has run for office in Little Rock in District 76, yeah,
Yep.
which is
District
his. Go ahead.
District 34 was in, and then District 76. District 34 then became District 76.
I say thank you. I was wondering about. I was like, so it shifted, but it was still the same historic black neighborhood,
Yep.
um, and that was an interesting journey. I say. That
Absolutely.
I've definitely. I've actually had you come and talk to my college courses a couple of times about that journey, and I think that we talked about it a couple of times outside of that. But that would take a whole Educeumm section on its own. But to say less, you know what I'm saying? Brian knows what's going on, and I wanted to talk to somebody who's probably been keeping up with the entire election because I have not. I won't lie. I have not been keeping up with it. But now I'm very interested and I'm intrigued. I was actually talking to Ryan a little bit before we came on, and I was saying I was in Italy this summer for 3 weeks, and people were asking me, about Trump and Biden and the election. I'm like, I'm in Arkansas. Like we've been there for 300 plus years, and I
Yeah.
think I'm going to make it through the next four, no matter who's in office. So we're gonna go with the flow. But now we're gonna see which way the flow's gonna go. So I got tons of questions, right?
Okay.
So first I'm gonna play my little video because I took a little bit of time and did that, right? So there we go. So this is our do some session with Ryan D. Davis, the 24 election, the Kamala Biden switch, right? Like so my thing is my first question, and I'll pause it when we get to the section I want to be at, is what just happened, Ryan? What happened? Because I've been seeing all kinds of things as far as I just read something today that said that the Trump administration was trying to do something to say that Kamala didn't have access to the money, right? Because this is unprecedented and no president has ever just dropped out of the campaign almost 100 days before the election. Let us know what's going on.
Yeah. Well, I'm not surprised that um, folks from the Trump campaign can be um, so out of touch with historical reality. And I want to, if you don't mind,
Please.
before I answer the question,
Mm,
I've talked often, especially to young people, about the fact of, and I get it, the way our politics and the way our elections are set up.
mhm.
It does not leave a lot of room for people to live their everyday lives and be involved in the great mess that is politics and elections in America. I mean, people are disengaged for a reason, and I don't blame them. It almost becomes a contest among and between elites sometimes. But I also think about Angela Davis, and we all know Angela Yvonne Davis, the great radical scholar, author, freedom fighter, activist. She talked about how she's talking about that phrase that a lot of people use in the '60s: the personal is political.
Mm.
She talks about it from the perspective that not only that what we experience on a personal level has profound political implications, but that our interior lives, our emotional lives, are very much informed by ideology. And so she goes on saying that's part of a quote, but she goes on to talk about how we oftentimes do the work of the state and through our interior lives, and what we often assume belongs most intimately to ourselves and to our emotional lives has been produced elsewhere, and that's been recruited to do the work of racism and repression. And
Mm.
so, the things that are happening politically out here in this world do affect and are part and parcel of who we are in the most interior sense. And so,
Mm.
I think it's unfortunate that politics in this nation, elections, the way in which we engage with them has been set up as something that's to look like a complete and total platform outside and away from the regular lives of people, when we know that the results of these most definitely affect the daily lives of everyday people. And even more so, it affects the daily lives of people who, as the great theologian, black theologian Howard Thurman said, live with their backs against the walls.
Mm.
You know, so these elections to me have always been about what can we do to mitigate against the anti-people, the anti-black, the anti-woman, the anti-poor policies that come out of both parties.
Mm.
For instance, today the governor of California is asking the Democratic governor of California is asking them to clear out every homeless encampment in the state. Um, Not with any solutions. He's not saying we're going to put them somewhere. He's saying
Right.
we don't like the way it looks. We clearing this stuff out. So
Wow.
and that was a matter of the Supreme Court deciding that. A previous Supreme Court would not have decided
Mm.
that was lawful, but this Supreme Court has essentially said that it is against the law to live outside, that it is against the law to be homeless in public spaces. Uh, but to answer your question, and the question again is, what just happened, right?
What just happened?
Well, so this is not contrary to what some folks and what the Trump campaign is saying. This is not really unprecedented. There
Okay.
was a time when presidents were not relegated to only 2 terms, and so from the very beginning of the so-called Republican democracy in America, presidents have decided not to run for office again. Now I get it. This was a bigger surprise, and the only other time that it was maybe as big a surprise is when in 1968, Lyndon Johnson um, Lyndon Johnson decided that, well, I guess on the one hand, Harry Truman in 1952, but that was kind of less surprise. He'd already been president since Roosevelt died in 1944. But Lyndon Johnson decided, really at around the same interval as President Biden has done in the summer of 1968. He said, and I quote, that he would not seek and that he would not accept his party's nomination for the office of president. We know
Mm.
at the time that Lyndon Johnson was very, very unpopular. The anti-war movement had ramped up, you know, um, and it was right on the heels or right after um, Martin Luther King had been assassinated, and we'd been through a season of assassinations in this country. And the American protest movement was in full swing. The anti-Johnson movement was in full swing, and so you saw folks like Bobby Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, who coincidentally, whose nutcase son is running for president now, um, who saw his opportunity. Now, of course, he was assassinated
Mm.
uh, in a hotel in California in that same year. But Johnson had assumed office following the death of the president, and then served a full term of his own, which means that he was eligible to run for a second term had he wanted to. But poor showings in New Hampshire primaries, because he did have other folks running against him. He exited the race, and you know it was and I'm sorry, I need to correct myself. Johnson did not drop out in the summer. He dropped out in the spring and I believe it was somewhere around late March or early April he
Okay.
dropped out of the race. And so this is unprecedented in that this is the shortest runway.
Yeah, they're like 100 days
100
to
days. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yes,
Yeah.
because to me, like that is kind of the biggest shocker, and I think that that's kind of as I've been listening like to the newsreels, there's a lot of the backlash is
Yeah.
over that, like only
Mhm.
giving 100 days to kind of conjure all of the support that you would need, try to get people who were kind of clocked out, clocked back in. You know what I'm saying? Um, all of that. It's really interesting that you said a lot of interesting, but I'm gonna let you keep going because I'll get a sidetrack. So I'm gonna sidetrack us at the end after we get through the basic points that
Yeah,
we want.
and I think one of the bigger things is that, of course, the primary process for electing a Democratic candidate had ended in every state at this point, whereas in all of the other instances where this happened, there were still primaries
Okay,
for folks to run and to vote in, and so the circumstances are very different. But like I said, this is not completely unprecedented, but
for sure.
the
Right,
circumstances are definitely very different. Uh,
right.
you know,
But what's interesting about what you just said is with Johnson, it kind of seems like it was an energy shift, right, from the populace,
yeah,
based on their public opinion of him, right, based on
yeah.
the war. And a similar thing seems to kind of been happening with Biden after
Mhm.
the debate, right? It
Mhm.
kind of seemed like there was an energy shift, like a big energy shift. But people were already kind of saying stuff, but after the debate, it became obvious. Did you watch the debate?
I did watch the debate, and I told myself I was not going to watch it because I mean a lot of these debates are setups and
Yeah,
self-flagellation and chest thumping because I mean I don't know how anybody could rightfully say that having any kind of head to head with Donald Trump can be called a debate. I mean it's just it turns into a whole bunch of messy childishness. But anyway, I watched it
okay,
because I'm interested in it. I mean, I watch debates like other folks who watch the Super Bowl. It's
for
something I'm
sure.
really interested in.
Mhm.
And I'm not suggesting that everybody else should have watched it. I mean, there was nothing really substantial to come out of that debate. But I think what people had hoped is that the President Biden, would have evidenced the same amount of energy, the same amount of clarity, the same amount of bullishness that they saw in the State of the Union address back earlier in the year,
Okay.
and he was so they were so pumped up by their experience with him in that instance that even Republicans were saying like, oh, he had to be drugged up. That's the only way he could have been as energetic and as clear. And so, what folks had assumed, what people had hoped, is that he was going to come out and be as energized as he was from the State of the Union address. It was so much so that even the Trump campaign began to say in the week leading up to the debate, "Oh, you can't underestimate Biden. He's a decent debater. You can't underestimate him."
Mm.
Whereas months before they were saying like, "Oh, um, he's senile and all of these other insulting things." Um, this ageism that was weird to me because their candidate is only 3 years younger than
Right.
him. It was just completely weird. Um, but then he came out and he had, I would say, 80% of his performance, and I'm speaking of President Biden, uh,
Okay.
80% of his performance in the debate was just like it was odd. I mean, it was if you are one of those people who was in his corner, and I'm not in his corner per se, not as a
I
person,
understand. Mhm.
but like it was just kind of like, wow, this is bad. A lot of things. Now, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a geriatric specialist or anything like that, so I don't know what was going on, but it looked bad.
No, it
Yeah,
was scary. No, I
yeah,
told you I watched the highlights, right?
yeah.
And so I'm not into politics, but y'all are, right? All of my
Hmm.
friends on my feeds are. So I get little clips, things of that nature. So leading up to the debate, I don't know, I'm sure that you saw this clip on Facebook of when they bought the black church, you know what I'm saying? And then Biden is up there looking lost. Did you see that clip? Right?
I did.
Yeah, and so I saw that clip, and that's kind of when that was before I went to Italy. So that was kind of when I was like, okay. And then they start coming with all those geriatric jokes, like you were saying, and talking
Yeah,
about him being old and senile, and then the internet go crazy, and
very
so
much so.
And so then when I watched the clips from the debate after this thing with Harris happened, I was terrified, right? I was like, these two men were running to to run the whole country. Like, right? And so it makes you want to go back and look at what the requirements are to
Right.
be president. You know what I'm saying? Like what do you got to do to be president again? I'm confused.
All you got to do is be 35
Right?
and be literally all you have to do is be at least 35 and be born in this country. That's it.
And have access to $100 million.
Well,
Because because
that's not a constitutional requirement, but that's definitely a practical requirement.
that's the, you know what I'm saying? That's how
Yeah.
you got to play the game, right? And
Yeah.
that's when you were talking to me, or when you were talking before, and I told you 100 things were going around in my mind, like why Black people feel exiled from the conversation, right? Why it feels like a political debate conversation. Because even when I'm talking to expats and stuff overseas, or people here when I come back who don't vote for whatever reason, they're like it's not even a game that we're a part of. Trump knew that he was going to run for president back in X, Y, and Z. You know what I'm saying? This man has no degrees, no history at all of doing anything political, and he is in the presidential office, right? So then you have people who have done the whole track. So I was looking at the Kamala Harris research, right? Because of course I didn't do that before our conversation, but I did now, and I was like, oh, she's been on this track for a while. I'm not gonna. I will admit it. Yeah, I didn't even know she ran for office in 2020, right? I had no idea, right? So this is something that has been on her trajectory. I also thought it was interesting that, well, I know she couldn't, you know what I'm saying? She couldn't say anything about, you know what I'm saying, whatever the president's situation is, but she didn't do anything to try and throw him under the bus, clearly saying that he wasn't in a position to run for president, right? It seems like a lot of people were trying to hide stuff, right? It kind of seems like that's just kind of part of it, because we know they were hiding stuff during the Trump election, right? And we know historically things have been hidden, I
Like
forget the
JFK's
for sure,
back injuries that had him in
right?
consistent pain, and
And
they
the
had
one
to
that was in the
prop him up.
wheelchair forever,
Franklin Roosevelt.
Roosevelt, right?
Even Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson, big time racist that he was. I mean, he was pretty much out of the last year of his presidency. I mean, people didn't even see him.
Wow.
You know, and then there were also the rumors around Ronald Reagan's mental instability, and of course we know that within less than a year of him leaving office, they talked about him having been diagnosed with Alzheimer's.
Mm.
And so there's the in many of the instances where folks say they should have invoked the 25th Amendment, whereby they question the ability of the president to serve, and they go by some route to remove her or him from office. They haven't, and so of course people inside, this side, they do a lot to protect a
Yes,
president.
for sure.
You know,
For sure. Okay. So the debate happened, had a pendulum swing, right?
yeah,
Then all of a sudden he comes out with this email, essentially, right? Because it seems like he told his close people, they were like, Kamala didn't even know, and then all of a sudden we have Kamala running up for president, right? He's endorsed her. My several people came out immediately, you know what I'm saying,
yeah.
supporting her as well. Obama came out and said that she's going to run her race, right? We're going to let her do her thing, and we're going to let people decide,
And he
right?
endorsed her. He and Michelle Obama endorsed
He
her
did
yesterday.
endorse her. Okay.
Endorsed her yesterday.
Okay. So she finally got the endorsement. Um, I also read on Tuesday that she did a thing in Milwaukee, a speech in Milwaukee, and at that point she had enough votes from the Democrats to officially, even, but they won't do that until August 19th or something at the actual convention,
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
but this speech she did at the Boule of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated, or as the Fox News people said, the colored sorority. Yeah, it was a colored sorority that she did the speech at. So
Oh my! So I was excited because you said she was in the Zeta Phi. I was like, okay, and then you
color.
ruined my excitement.
Yeah.
All
Well, they
that.
were questioning why she was not, I guess at some sort of receipt. Well, had not been in Washington D.C. to receive the criminal prime minister of Israel, the war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu.
Mm.
You know, so.
Okay, so he came in that same day that she was doing the Zeta Phi Beta.
Mhm.
Okay, okay, okay. So, do you know anything about who has rallied behind her? So, I heard the Clintons, the Obamas.
Yeah,
What?
the Clintons, the Obamas, all of the party leadership, Jim Jeffries, excuse me, Hakeem Jeffries, I call that man Jim Jeffries, Lord have mercy. Hakeem Jeffries, Nancy Pelosi,
Okay,
Jim Clyburn from South Carolina. And so a lot of I say pretty much all of the party leadership, Charles Schumer, who is the Senate Majority Leader now, Senator from New York. So all of the party leadership has, and enough of the promised delegates to secure her the nomination. And so, um, pretty much everybody. In fact, if there are people in the party who are against her, they've been real quiet about it.
right.
There was speculation that that former President Obama wanted an open convention, but like I said, he and Michelle Obama were recorded video recorded calling her to congratulate her and to offer their support and endorsement. So
Mm.
uh, it is essentially a done deal at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember when I was doing my research, seeing that she, so somebody was saying, like, realistically, because there are only 100 days left, who could run against her, right? Who's going to be able to, build get the money that they need, right? And
Mhm.
then um, establish the rapport, for lack of a better word, right? So we already know that Harris has been in office for 4 years, like, so she's tested, right? So whoever the other person is would have to prove that they would be able to withstand, you know what I'm saying, within
Mhm.
100 days, and then also within the last 100 days, you're kind of splitting the Democratic Party, right? When the objective is to get Trump out of office. So does it look like you're in it for self, right, and for the party or whatever, or does it look like
Right.
you're just trying to, you know, whatever? So I read that she made raised $81 million in her first 24 hours.
Yeah.
$81 million, right?
Yeah.
Then by 36 hours in to having announced her presidency, she was already at presidential election. She was at 100 million plus the about 100 million, right? That she can get that's left over from the Biden um,
Yep.
election. So then she's at $200 million to
She can
spend.
spend $2 million a day on this election
Yeah,
at
I
this
was
point.
about to say, I was literally about to say in 100 days, Ryan.
Excuse me.
In a
Yeah.
hundred days, she got two
Yeah.
hundred million dollars. I wish I was a media like,
And she'll be able to raise more. It seems like
oh yeah, like
it
people still
looks like
sending
every month.
money. People are still sending money. And so to me, like, I guess my question with that is then, so what do you think, right? So I definitely was siloed, right? Or you know what I'm saying? I was like out of it. You know what I'm saying? I'm kind of just was an observer, right?
Right.
So what groups do you think will re-enter the fold for whatever reason, or excuse me, for lack of a better word? Do you think that there really is a chance for her to win the election on a national level? Because that was the question I told you I was going to ask you about. Could you explain, as you're talking about all of this, a little what the electoral college is, right? How that is involved in the voting process when we place our votes, how that reflects on those votes, right? And then how it ultimately leads to who our president is. Could you also talk a little bit about these major states that people are talking about that we have to win, right? Arkansas is irrelevant, right? But Michigan is important. Florida is important. California is important, right? There are
Yep.
these states that are really, really important, you know what I'm saying, for people to win, right? And it like proves the whole election, right? Like, yeah, it's a lot. So for those of us who kind of know the words but don't really understand what they talking about, Could you please?
Yeah, and if you don't, I had to make myself some post-it notes
Please, yes.
about the some post-it note points about the electoral college. And
Hmm.
you know, the root of the electoral college is in the post so-called American Revolutionary War Constitutional Convention. And um and where I first learned about kind of the um, the intent behind the electoral college comes from Alexander Hamilton's contribution to the Federalist Papers, specifically Federalist Paper number 68. Did a very in-depth study of the Federalist Papers with uh, Professor Paul Fisher at Lake Forest College,
That's right.
and wrote a very extensive paper myself on Federalist number 68 in the Electoral College. And so, it was an attempt by smaller states to not have bigger states dominate the national stage um, in politics. So initially, the Electoral College votes were in proportion to the number of each state's senators and House members. Each
Hmm.
state, of course, has two senators and then a number of House members based on their population. In addition, there was the discussion regarding whether Congress or the state legislatures should choose the chief executive. Now, remember, this is a very different time in American politics. This is a time when only men, in general, white men in particular,
Hmm.
and uh, uh, land owning white men in particular
Hmm.
had access to the vote. Now that changed state by state, but still by and large, we're talking about white men who were landowners. And
Hmm.
so this was a conversation among elites. This was not something that even this was not democracy. This was folks at the top of the chain deciding that we're wise and we feel like everybody else is not capable of making these particular kinds of
Right.
decisions. So we don't want the popular vote making um, the populace making this kind of major decision. They
Mm.
can vote for their state legislatures, they can vote for their congresspersons and all these other things, but we don't want them deciding who is ultimately the leader of the nation. And so they explicitly rejected the idea of a popular vote for president because they did not trust voters
Mm.
to make what they would consider wise choice. And so, how it has functioned in practice in most elections, electoral colleges operated the way that they wanted to. So, what some folks would consider fairly smoothly, which is to say that the states vote, and whatever person wins the majority of the state, they get all of the electoral votes.
Oh.
Now, where it has fallen apart is in several elections. The first one being 1800. Thomas Jefferson received the same number of electoral votes as his vice presidential candidate Aaron Burr, who went on famously to murder Alexander Hamilton in a duel. How about
Right.
that guy? And
Mhm.
so at the time, the ballot didn't distinguish between electoral college votes for president and vice president. And so there was always confusion. There's been historically a lot of confusion. And so on the 36th ballot, the House chose Jefferson as the new president. Congress had to amend the Constitution to prevent the ballot confusion from happening again. But only 2 decades later, in the election of 1824, there were four presidential candidates, and they all belonged to the same party. They all
Mm.
belonged to, you ready for this? The Democratic Republican Party.
That's
Yeah.
wow.
And they were each popular in whatever region they were from. This is before TV, and so regional popularity was a big thing,
Mhm.
which is why you'll find a lot of presidents before the age of radio and television, a lot of presidents from states like New York, Ohio. You'd be surprised, maybe not, but you'd be surprised at how many presidents we've had from Ohio. A lot, because
Mhm.
Ohio's a big state. Ohio's right there next to Michigan. Ohio's right there next to Pennsylvania. So next to these states with big populations, and you get enough regional support, you can become the president.
Mhm.
And so anyway, Andrew Jackson got 99 electoral college votes, and John Quincy Adams got 84, and the other two, Henry Clay and the other person I can't remember, got less. That's all I can remember. But no candidate got the necessary 131 electoral college votes. And
Mhm.
so the House of Representatives had to go in and do something about it. And so the 12th Amendment to the Constitution, each state delegation cast one vote among the top three candidates. And so basically, even though John Quincy Adams got less votes, uh, um, excuse me, even though uh, Andrew Jackson got more votes, he lost the presidency
Hmm.
at that time to Andrew Jackson. And then we come back again after the Civil War. And begins to be more consequential because now you're talking about black men voting. And this is, the election of 1876. This is America's centennial. America's 100 years old at this point. And so this is a big and very important election. And this is really one of the last where you see large black male voter turnout, because then of course you start getting a lot of black voter suppression and the return of the South to the so-called Redeemers who wanted to reestablish white supremacy, or higher levels of white supremacy that never went away. But the race was so close that the electoral votes of just 4 states determined the presidency. And so on election day, a guy named Tilden we don't know Tilden because he didn't become president, but let's talk about him for a second. He got the popular vote plurality. He got more of the popular vote, but he fell 1 vote short of the electoral college majority. So Rutherford Hayes, curse him, claimed that his party would have won in Florida, South Carolina, and if I'm not mistaken, I believe Mississippi. Or they would have won these 3 particular southern states, but he said that they didn't win because of black voter suppression in those states, that black voters were being intimidated, and those black voters would have voted for him, and he would have won the election, and he didn't, only because of black voter suppression. Now, oddly enough, the irony is, of course, that he did become president, and Rutherford Hayes did become president, and because of that election, they established the bipartisan electoral commission, which still exists to this day. He won the election, and then he pulled the soldiers out of the South and left, saying black populations and all of their strivings in the hands of the white supremacists. After complaining that, oh no, if black people had been able to vote, I would have won the election. So it's one of the very first instances of black votes being taken for granted. And no deliveries happening after the black vote is delivered. So there's that. So anyway, and then we go all the way up to the 2000 race, and I'm not really saying anything new. The electoral college works that way. You win the majority of the state. Now, to be clear with you, the electors in those states are not required, to give their electoral votes to
the popular vote of the
the
state.
candidate who won the popular vote.
Have there been cases where that's happened, where the electoral college voted opposite of the popular vote of the state?
No, it hasn't happened.
Okay.
And so, but I think for the sheer possibility, especially considering, what we're up against, what people in general are up against, that the electoral college is outdated.
It really is. I don't under. I would. That's why I wanted you to, because I just wanted to make sure I understand it correctly, right? But also, like, I don't like. What would it take for it to be like disbanded? Like, why is it still there? Is it because, like, do those people get? You know how certain offices within the presidential office stay there forever, kind of like the Supreme Court, and then other ones rotate in and out? Is electoral college one that stays or one that rotates in and out?
They stay.
And I think that would be the main
I
reason.
mean, you think about the fact that Donald Trump lost the popular vote by 3 million votes. That's not an insignificant amount of people.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You're talking about a significant, 3 million is a lot by any measure. You lose an election by 3 million votes, but you win based on the electoral college. And the fact of the matter is, and this is not me favoring in any partisan kind of way, the fact is, though, that the Republican Party has not won a presidential election with the popular vote since Ronald Reagan. Last ran in 1984. So, we're talking about 40 years of any Republican president who has won in the past 40 years has won without the benefit of the popular vote. And so you're saying that the majority of the people have not voted for a Republican president since Ronald Reagan. The majority of the people who bothered to vote. That has to mean something.
Right. And that's why it's always confusing to me. How can the popular vote be one way, but the right? Because if they always vote in the way of the of the majority of the state, but it can overlap. Yeah, right. So most of the people in Arkansas vote for Trump, but there are a number of people who don't vote for, and those votes don't get counted. Right? They basically get erased.
It basically at a particular point, if you know if of, I was trying to think of the number of eligible voters in Arkansas. If the vote were split 50-50, and you had one more vote for for the Republican candidate, they would win every single solitary bit of the electoral votes, and that's odd to me. I don't know why we've never decided to do a system whereby you could divide the amount of electoral votes based on percentage, or get rid of the electoral college altogether and let's just do a
Let's
popular
just vote.
voting process.
Yes. And
You know,
the people that show up, you know what I'm saying? And then it really would be a battle to get people to the box. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Because most of the people that I know who don't vote because of the electoral college, right? It's
yeah.
like, and particularly with the state that we're in, right? It's even
Mhm.
when you're in a state that you like, it's half and half, and like your vote matters but like we're in Arkansas,
Yeah.
right? You know what I'm saying?
But I think too that and I tell folks all the time, but there's so many more other things on the ballot, and there's so many other voting
Right.
opportunities that come across that we need to be more attentive to. Now, granted, I think, yeah, for sure. I think Arkansas is pretty much sold out for Donald Trump in the presidential election, but there is the possibility via some ballot initiatives that we'll be discussing everything from the expansion of medical marijuana
Mm-hmm.
to whether or not women have a right to any form of abortion as a medical procedure or otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and then of course there are always, the elections in between where, we have an opportunity to get rid of French Hill as a congressman and vote for somebody else, or to change the state legislature. And I think that's where the disengagement to me is a bigger issue,
Yeah.
because the Republican Party has spent the past 50 years to great results in one, electing state legislatures. And they went from 1978 having 20 of the 50 state legislatures to now having 36 of all of the state, 36 majorities in the state legislatures. And so, that means something,
Mm-hmm.
because, you know, um, even in a Biden or Harris administration, uh, if federal money comes down the pipeline and states have the option as to how they administer that, it's your state legislature that says to you, well, in order for people who have food insecurity to get to get what the federal government has given us, we're going to do what's called means testing, which is to say, um, how many hours a week are you working? Can you volunteer? Without taking into consideration that somebody who lives in Parkdale, Arkansas, an isolated place in the middle of southern Arkansas, where there exist no opportunities, you're excluding them from an ability to eat based on the false premise that people who use food stamps are lazy. You know,
Right.
and so I
Right.
mean, like those things have consequences. Those are very, very consequential things. And I
Right.
think I just wish that, because I think we spend a lot of energy around presidential elections, and that's not the foundational part of how we build Black political power.
Right.
The foundational part is neighborhood associations, uh, is making sure that our fraternities and sororities don't think that going around handing out voter registration forms does anything, because more than 50% of voter registration forms don't even get turned in. And then only 50% of those that get turned in actually result in somebody going and voting. So, what are we using our energy and our resources toward? I think a lot of it, especially in churches, especially among Black Greek letter, not to disparage them, but I'm just thinking kind of on a personal level, Black Greek letter organization and other civic organizations, we spend a lot of time between the spring and the fall of a presidential election year, insisting to people that you need to do this or you're gonna die. It's the end of the world. President's Day is really important. Rally around, get it together, get it together, get it together. And we're trying to rush people into a position that we've never cultivated to begin with.
Mm.
When in reality, in those odd number years is when we really need to be doing the political education work. You know,
Sure.
this is what's on the horizon. This is, I mean, give folks a practical hold of, and then always taking into account that there are barriers being set up against voting in this state.
So
And
thank
so if
you.
people don't vote, I mean, like, it's not 100% just somebody's fault. It's not because folks are being lazy. I saw it.
Right.
I saw folks during the primary drive up to me while I was out campaigning saying, "Oh, well, my polling place is closed. Where do I need to go to vote?" And folks who spent, folks on walkers, folks who had to get rides, folks whose
Yes.
voting precincts are no longer within walking distance of their house, and
Yes.
and so I mean, there is an effort to suppress the votes of what Republicans think are traditionally Democratic voters, and specifically Black voters. You know,
Right.
and if your church's van is sitting there in the bay and not driving nobody to vote, then they don't need to complain about people not voting.
I
You
say.
know, we need to.
For
I'm
sure.
sorry.
No. I 100%. I completely agree. It's interesting because, well, one, all of our attention is around the election because they have $200 million to focus our attention
Oh yes.
on the
Mhm.
election, right? I know that you didn't have that amount of money for your campaign, right? That are anywhere close to that amount, and then people with the most money, uh, they have these campaigns. They try to tie themselves to certain ideals or certain people, right? And then for me, my big thing, because I know that voting is important, right? Which is why I don't mind ignoring the presidential election because I know the other ones are important. But like you just reminded me, there are other things on the ballot, right? Besides that, which are important for you to vote for. But half of the time when I go in the box, I get bamboozled because I don't know what's on the ballot, right? And then I don't know what I'm voting for, right? We've talked about this before. They will switch the language so it feels like you are saying yes to something that you're trying to say no to, or no to something you're trying to say yes to, right? So if they'll have the time when you get in there, you feel like you're being tricked. So I agree. There should be a process, right? Where we're kind of informing everybody of what's going on, what is going to be
Mhm.
on the ballot, right? These are things to be aware of because voting is happening much more often than just during the presidential election, right? And then it's happening on a state level, then it's happening on federal, and like you said, that trickles down and stuff happens. Like I remember I was reading about, we get free lunch at the library or whatever, anywhere in the state of Arkansas. But I read again that Louisiana, I think, turned it down again for their whole entire state.
Yeah,
They're like
Louisiana, whose priorities. I mean, these are cultural priorities. These folks don't have a grasp on reality. You're talking about a state that has high levels of food insecurity, especially among children. And I mean, I don't know, whatever your ideology is, you have to be, you have to be, you got to be a devil to want to take food out of the mouths of children so you can prove a political point about government aid. I mean, and here's the deal. This is what I want folks to understand, especially some of my folks, my people. We talk a lot about, oh, well, I say we, I don't, but I've heard folks say, oh, we need to just divest from the system. Just, this, it ain't for us. But
Mhm.
here's the deal. We as Black people paid literally hundreds of billions of dollars into the tax system. Those resources are ours. Those resources fund public schools, they fund public libraries, they fund roads, they fund the things that allow us to function in general
Mhm.
as a civil society. And we live in the civil society. Now, I can understand on a certain level saying that we want to we want to coalesce around each other. We want to do some Ujima and some Ujama and some Kujichagulia and stuff like that or whatever. But I mean, I think we'd be foolish to lose sight of the fact that divestment from this particular system means divestment from the resources that are rightfully ours. That was a part of the Black school movement of post Reconstruction and the Black school movement of the 1960s and 70s. It was saying, you know, this is our money too.
I say.
You know what I'm saying? And we want the money that we have put into the government's coffers to be used for, for our community also. You know what I'm saying? So divesting from the system means instead of saying going to City Hall and saying, I need more better sidewalks in the South End, like I've done, and I've seen results from that because we got a decent enough mayor,
Mhm.
you know what I'm saying? That that we would just say, well, no, we're just gonna do it. It doesn't make any practical sense. And then
Right.
the second part about that is that you're talking about millions of Black people in this country. And let's just be for real. we don't have the same, the 50 million of us don't have the same level of agreement about every single solitary thing. And so any black political agenda would have to be broad and fairly unspecific. And it would not be the first one to come out. You remember the Black Political Convention of 1972 or 73, where
Mm,
Amir Baraka, it was in Gary, Indiana.
mm,
Very symbolic place because it was the first big metropolis to have a black mayor. So it
mm,
was in Gary, Indiana, and you had people coming from trade unions, from cultural nationalist organizations, from black communist organizations, from black self-defense organizations, from traditional black organizations like the NAACP and Urban League, to workers, to just plain everyday people, unionist school teachers. And when they got there, what they quickly found out was, we all love black people. We all want the best of black people. But we have, if there are 50 different groups in here, there's at least 49 different ways that we want to go about this. And so, this panacea idea that there is a singular black way of doing things is not realistic. It just really is not. I mean, hell, we got different black denominations that have doctrinal differences right now. You know what I'm saying? You can't even get the church together. You know what I'm saying? So I mean, I think there are some things that we can agree on, that we can focus on, and we can work together on. But I think that sometimes I hear people who say divest from the system are the people who are able to do it. And it sounds kind of like a
mm,
selfish notion to me. The idea that,
mm.
oh, well, I got the means and the way and the education and I'm gonna go and do it. But, and then looking down on everybody else because you haven't done the organizing work to make this a reality. I
Right.
mean, and then folks act like they're the first person to do it. I mean, Fannie Lou Hamer, who came out from being a sharecropper into the traditional civil rights movement, into the radical civil rights movement, to being a Pan-Africanist, to being somebody who decided, I'm gonna start a co-op farm, and then just couldn't get any aid for it, couldn't get anybody to contribute to it, and it failed. But then she started organizing folks who worked on the catfish farms in Mississippi. You know what I'm saying? So somebody who had a long political trajectory and whose life we can really learn a lot from, because I mean, she realized that black people are not single issue people. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? She realized that, black political progress was more than an every 4-year prospect. That
Mm.
we have to be thinking long term.
Yeah. Yeah. I know you did a quote earlier from Angela Davis, but
Mhm.
I'm sure that there was another quote, but that said something about being black is being political, right?
Yep.
It's impossible, particularly in this space, but really in every other space too. And being an African American, right? That's a political conundrum that is spoken about on a scholarly level in every academic space around the world. You know what I'm saying? And so I think a lot of times this separation that you're talking about, I think it sounds selfish, it sounds unrealistic, and it sounds like you're trying to deny part of yourself. You know what I'm saying? Like you can't separate yourself from the history and from the facts and from the experience. You know what I'm saying? I think a lot of times we are trying to separate ourselves from like the full experience, for lack of a better word. Like we
Yeah.
want to take parts of it, you know what I'm saying, and not all of it. And that is something that kind of hit home with me while I was overseas, because I had to speak at a conference, and it was eye opening to hear the way that they spoke about African Americans not being African American, right? Like people who literally study Black culture, Black American culture, and then go to conferences to inform other national scholars about Black culture, and they're not Black. And I'm just dumbfounded. Excuse me. Some of them are Black, you know what I'm saying? Some of them are, but they're
Hmm.
not African American, right? They're not African American. They're in the way that they talk about us is very problematic. Um and but they use this as a political pendulum to explain, you know what I'm saying, political issues and differences globally
Hmm.
based on a unique African American experience. And a lot of times they dissect that experience with non-Black scholars, right? Or if they do use a Black scholar, it's not African American scholar, right? And we have
Well, and you're talking about folks who you're talking a lot of times about folks who don't really have any view of the internal discussions that black people are having, because we always having internal discussions. You know what I'm saying? We're always and I tell this to some of my black friends, and I've had to say this a lot recently, unfortunately, to folks because folks a lot of times also will speak out of ignorance, will say that something has not happened or didn't happen because they didn't know nothing about it. You know what I'm saying? I try not to be in a position like that, because you look at the radical black congresses of the South in the late 1800s. You look at the Niagara movement, which was a very public movement that resulted in the establishment of the NAACP. So you look at the National Coalition of Negro Women. You look at the women's clubs of the 19th and 20th centuries, which were popularized by black women like Dorothy Height and Mary McLeod Bethune.
Mm-hmm.
You look at the think tanks that have come out of these situations. I mean, you look. I'm just there's entirely too much evidence of black political thought and black American political thought and Pan-African thought, which and let's just be for real here, Pan-Africanism is black American. The Pan-African Congress was called by Du Bois and Alice Gibbs, who was the daughter of Mifflin Gibbs, who was a judge right here in Arkansas. And Mary Church Terrell and stuff like that. I mean, the Pan-African Congresses came out of black American, Samuel Blyden and goodness gracious, I can't remember his first name, but Delaney, Reverend Delaney, and those Pan-Africanists, and the thrust of Pan-Africanism, the idea that there is a worldwide black identity and a worldwide black need for unity, came out of that. Now, mind you, you know what I'm saying? It was most greatly expressed in the 20th century in Marcus Garvey, in my opinion, in the work of Marcus Garvey, who was Jamaican, but Marcus Garvey himself was influenced by Booker T. Washington and the uplift idea of Booker T. Washington, and he brought his organization to New York City. He didn't keep it in Kingston. He didn't take it to Lagos, but it was still languishing under colonial powers, and so, I think the conversation is unfortunate. I'm using this term literally. It's unfortunately ignorant. People talk about something they don't even know about, what I'm saying? And even some of the scholars, unfortunately, are saying things. And, and I think, this idea that black people just don't know what's going on. They don't know what to do, but.
Yes. But that's why we there, because I didn't let them leave the space without a thorough history of our action that they said that we had inaction around. But that's why I feel like these conversations are important, right? Because what these political moves that are happening in this space are being talked about globally, right? The way that black people show up in this space, you know what I'm saying, is being talked about globally. Kamala Harris being identifying as a black woman is being talked about globally, right? Right. So,
whether or not she does, and what she said, and I mean, people say they have this clip of her saying like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I was trying to. There was some ants on my desk. I'm trying to get away from me. And so the fact that part of her identity is South Asian. People think that somehow says something about her. But I'm just like, I mean, I don't know. Part of her identity is South Asian, though. You know what I'm saying? But that same South Asian mother who raised her, you know what I'm saying, insisted that she go to Howard. Insisted that she be raised in a black church, and her church is black as hell. I've been to her black church that her mother insisted that she be raised in. So her mother knew what identity was. I mean, that woman looked like salt and pepper. When I saw that picture of it, had the asymmetric with the bamboo earrings. Now, mind you, I know asymmetric and some bamboo earrings don't make you a black person, but I'm telling you like this, for somebody who they're saying is trying to shy away from or trying to move away from her identity as a black person, she sure does do a poor job of it.
Right.
Now, folks talk about her marrying, her being married to a white man. I ain't got nothing to do with that. That ain't got nothing to do with me. And you know what I'm saying? People make their own choices there. And, I don't know how important that is to the conversation, because
it's not important to the conversation at all. It's a emotional wound of the black community around certain people, because we had a problem with Eve when she got married to her white billionaire, millionaire, whoever he is.
Ketanji Jackson Brown on the Supreme Court.
You know what I'm saying? Serena, whoever the black women are that marry,
but not Sidney Poitier. Not Thurgood Marshall, who was married to an Asian lady. Not Dave Chappelle, who's married to an Asian lady. I'm just saying, man. Not Sammy Davis Jr.
Uh,
Not Harry Belafonte.
who we know is for the people.
Yeah. And so I'm just like, I think we need a little equanimity here. We need to like really think about what we're talking about. And just, and I unfortunately see this a lot from brothers. You know what I'm saying? A lot of misinformation about, because here's the deal. I identify as a democratic socialist.
Okay.
I identify as somebody who, if Cornel West were in position to win the presidency, I think we'd be fortunate to have Cornel West as president.
I agree.
He's not in position to win president, though. Not the way not the way we're set up. But that being said, if we're gonna be realistic about, of the in this binary situation of the two candidates, even Angela Davis said this. She said it's not about who best represents you, who has your same political identity. It's about who leaves space for the anti-capitalist, anti-racist, anti-patriarchal movement in America. Who leaves some space for that? Who can be, as she said in 2020, who can be nudged in a particular direction? And she was just like, this is not an endorsement. She's like, but it's a part of our reality. There is one candidate in this case that could be nudged into a particular direction. Now, folks are talking about Kamala Harris's record as a district attorney. And everybody is convinced by this lie that she locked up a whole bunch of black men for marijuana charges.
Mm-hmm.
And then they talk about her record as an attorney general. Look, again, she's a neoliberal vulture capitalist, just like the rest of the people in the Democratic Party. She's no different than Barack Obama, who I know a whole bunch of folks love. Barack Obama drone bombed more people than George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush combined. It's a fact. Barack Obama bailed out banks, but couldn't bail out households and regular people. Banks were too big to fail in his administration, but families failed in his administration. That's just the reality of neoliberal politics in America. So it's not about identifying with them as somebody coming to save us, because ain't nobody coming to save us but ourselves. But it is about making these incremental changes and understanding this national election for what it is. It's a referendum so that we can get some trickle down, where we are, so that we can make a stopgap where we are, and we can move on the local elections. But I'm sorry, I'm obscuring something.
Oh.
Kamala Harris's record as DA, they talk about, she locked up so many black men for marijuana. So, here's the deal. I don't have any personal knowledge of her. And so what did I do? I went and looked it up, and I looked at reliable sources, not somebody's TikTok video, not a YouTube video of somebody saying some things that are not true. But, I looked at the Brennan Center. I looked at the readily available arrest records that in the state of California. The state of California did a study one year about marijuana arrests and convictions in different, municipalities. The go to jail rate in San Francisco was so low that they didn't even include it in the study. Low in comparison to Los Angeles, to San Diego, to Sacramento, to Oakland, right? Why? Because of the 1,900 plus marijuana arrests that came through her office when she was DA. Now, mind you, she didn't do the arresting. The police did the arresting.
Right.
Of the 1,900 arrests that came through there, only 45 people went to jail. Why? Because she purposely set up alternative programs for folks who got convicted for marijuana possession that help folks avoid jail. Now, look, again, I think that the institution of policing is poisonous all the way to the root, and that anything from it is the fruit of a poisonous tree. And so, like, I don't trust it in general, but I'm saying, like, I don't have to lie about her personal record as a DA in order to, justify, well, let me rephrase that. If you have to lie about her record as a DA to justify your opposition, then you don't really have opposition. You just a hater. And you a hater too, because you didn't even, do the bare minimum of going and looking for yourself to see. And then people talk about, but when she was attorney general, all kind of black men was going to jail. And I was like, okay, now here's a fundamental misunderstanding of what attorneys general do. An attorney general of the state is not in the court prosecuting people. No, that's not how that works.
Right.
So, you know what I'm saying? So I just want to encourage people in general to make your decision based on facts and knowledge, especially since in this day and age it's readily available. Look,
Yeah.
propaganda can easily have been made about and toward a person in 1950, but
Mm.
these folks walk around with the World Wide Web in their pocket, with the ability to look and to parse and to see and to look through. Now, I know a lot of folks ain't interested in looking; they just don't like her. She ain't for us. That's what one guy told me. She ain't for us, and I was like, "For us meaning what?"
Right.
Like, name a president that has been for us per se. I mean, like, I'm not looking for somebody to come out and eat fried chicken with me and to, what I'm saying, and to put, what I'm saying, I don't
I,
know, check in my mail.
Brian, I heard an amazing quote while I was in Italy because I was pissed at all these scholars, right? They said when it comes to Black people, for some reason, critical thinking like disappears, right? Like it evaporates. Like the ability to like go do research and to like critically analyze whether or not this person might be saying something because it benefits or are listening to your own words and seeing if they might be an oxymoron, you know what I'm saying? When it comes to and I wonder if it's because we're used to being treated in that manner. We're used to people not dealing with our situations with like critical thought or with comparison or with equity. Therefore, we do the same thing to ourselves. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, so I'm not going to give you any critical thought either, right?
Well,
Like that's into like just hearing you talk about it is just it's like why? Like what is happening? Like how is this even a comparison? And then she going against Trump. Like how what?
oh, I've heard black people say, a young black lady here, who just, I'm not going to describe, but, she's like, oh, you know, we were doing better under Donald Trump under, than under the Biden administration. And I'm just like, okay, okay. I don't know, what that means on a relatively individual basis. I mean, maybe you are doing better as an individual. I don't know that that has anything to do with this presidential administration, or not, or anything like that, or whatever. But I do know that if you're looking at any of the so-called economic indicators, that the level of poverty in the country has gone down, the level of black employment has gone up, uh,
Mhm.
the level of black home ownership has gone up, and that there are new initiatives encouraging banks, uh, via tax breaks, to invest more in black communities and stuff like that, or whatever. I mean, like, and I'm not even saying those things have really, like, the value of those things have been, have run their best course. But I'm saying is that this is something that exists in this administration that would not, under any circumstances, exist in the next. And that's just a matter of fact. The Trump administration is not going to continue having a special bank initiative for black home ownership and stuff like that, or whatever, because they don't believe in that. You know
Mm.
what I'm saying? So, like, the ideology doesn't match up. And I mean, like, I don't know. I think it's unfortunate that contrarian is a new political identity. And you
Mm.
don't have to be educated to be a contrarian.
That's
You
right.
don't have to have done any research. You just have to have a counter opinion. And for them, they think, oh, this is what makes me independent minded, because I don't think the same thing as all these other people think. And then they wrap it up in this idea that they're smart, and that it's black people who are too stupid to understand when they're being screwed into the okie doke. See, black people need to do this, black people need to do that. And it's an insult to the ancestors, because black people, since black people started voting in 18, on wide scale in 1872, have always tried to do some organizing around the best interests of black people. That's always been the case. You know what I'm saying? Now, whether or not they were right, whether or not it was effective, is a whole different conversation. But I
Right.
mean, let's not insult folks by saying, like, some of these people think that they were the first ones to invent, what I'm saying, thinking. But I don't know, China. It's a multifaceted problem.
It's insane out here. I like, and I see why we have to have more conversations and just be more consistent. You know what I'm saying when talking about these political endeavors. Because I think I told you before, you know what I'm saying, as a person with like 2 masters, about to get their PhD, I know how intimidating the ballot box is for me.
Yeah.
Like that shit is so intimidating going in
But
there.
in China, you're highly educated, highly intelligent,
and it's
and
intimidating.
exactly. And but you know what though, and that's also a thing that I can do. I can admit that. You know what I'm saying? Like I didn't come by these facts because like, you know, they were just poured into my head, but because like we have to have a level of intellectual curiosity about what's going on in our world. And we have to be willing to sit down and do the hard work of thinking about it, talking about it, hearing from folks who know something about it so that we can learn about it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Instead of taking the easy route of, well, I'm gonna watch a few YouTube videos and whichever one confirms what I already erroneously believe, I'm gonna run with that one. I'm gonna run with that one.
You know, you got to be willing to be wrong. You know what I'm saying? I think a lot of times we're not willing to be wrong. You know, are willing to be caught out. I know my cousin just talked to me yesterday, other day, and you can fact check this for me. Thank you. I was just literally talking to my cousin yesterday, and he's like, "Chy'Na, you know why we have family reunions, right?" I was like, "Yeah, so I can know who my people are." He was like, "No, Chy'Na, you know how they started, right?" And I was like, "He's like, why?" He's like, "White people don't have family reunions." I was like, "What you talking about?" But he was talking to me about, you know, slave, you know, they would separate us, and then like in some places once a year they were allowed to come back together, you know, around Christmas, something like that. And he said they were called family. Is that true? Is that where family reunion started in slavery?
I've never heard of that before.
As that's what I said, I never heard of that. I should. So I'm doing my research because I gave it to him, but I'm gonna do my research and I'm gonna find out. And I was like, I thought white people had family reunions. Okay.
I mean, I was getting ready to say I know a white person. You know, it's funny because somebody asked that question. This girl, Candace Williams, how you doing, Candace? She asked that question. She said, "Do white people have family reunions?" And like got a whole host of responses. And besides that, I know some white people had family reunions, so I don't know. I don't. And you know, I think maybe the urgency of Black family reunions has something to do with the fact that, you know, one of the things that came out of the system of Black enslavement in this country is the separation and the dissolution of families. And so, you know, getting together is, I imagine, you know,
a big deal. Yeah, for sure. I mean, in some places it did happen once a year. I know in some places it happened on Sundays. You know what I'm saying? If the plantations were close enough to each other, you know what I'm saying, they would allow the families to come. It was different depending on, of course, the owner, the space you were in, things of that nature. Right? It wasn't the same across the board. But I just thought that was really interesting. It's definitely something I'm going to do some more research on. One more thing before we go, because you know I can't let the conversation. And I was trying to Google it. Discreetly, but it didn't happen. I'm hoping that you know who I'm talking about. What in Chicago, the Black woman that just got shot in her home?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I gotta find her name right quick.
Yeah, because we got to say her name.
We gotta say her name. Internet is acting janky. In Springfield, right?
It's Sonia Massey.
Yes, Sonia Massey.
Sonia Massey. You know,
Yes.
got a lot of people rethinking their theology. Because you hear Sonia Massey call on the name of Jesus, and
In the video she did.
yeah,
I can't watch
I
it.
did. Me and you both. I'm not gonna watch it. You know what I'm saying? You know, and I don't begrudge anybody else for watching it.
I don't. I just can't participate. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it is akin, in my opinion, to being a spectator at a lynching.
Postcards to me, it's like these how they be sent. Is to me, it's like the lynching postcards, right? Like it's traumatizing to me hearing the situation, like hearing what happened.
Yeah,
traumatizing. It's 100% traumatizing. I don't need to see the video of what happened.
No, indeed.
Yeah. Yes, but yeah, I could. That was rattling around in the back of my mind. I couldn't let us get off here without. And then we both went to school at like Forest, you know what I'm saying, which is not far. And like there were a lot of like I had a good experience while I was there. Let me first say that, right? I had a very positive experience while I was in Lake Forest. I didn't have any issues, but I often hear of racial issues and discrimination happening in that particular area, right? Because it's kind of elitist, right? They have a lot of money up there, right? And I never wanted to get pulled over by the cops, right? We always
Right.
following instructions. We always trying to make sure that we in the right lane. So, but it was knowing that she called for protection, right? And then ended up getting shot in her home without a weapon. Here we go again, right? Because how do white men have weapons or be beaten up on the police, right? All of this stuff, and then they not get shot, but a black woman without a weapon, right? That's always perplexing in this space, right? And to me speaks back to the point of our bodies being political. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And our bodies having a whole entire conversation, a whole entire narrative that's put on them before, right? We even open our mouths. And again, the importance of knowing what's going on politically, right? Because all of this shit trickles down, right? Because to me, I'm trying to still understand what is the training process. But if you don't got to do shit but be 35 to be excuse me, I have to edit.
Right.
You don't got to anything would be 35 to be president. So I got to do nothing to be the police. I know you don't. I know it's no requirements to carry a gun and have people's lives in your hand. Zero requirements, just like a zero requirements for the presidency. Because Trump was over here talking about.
And then you get qualified immunity on top of that.
And then you get qualified immunity.
Yeah.
I say.
Almost like the Supreme Court is given the presidency.
Ryan, thank you for an amazing conversation. Thank you for enlightening us and reminding us of the importance of being politically aware, right? Of getting this information for ourselves. Before we get off of here, can you give me some recommendations? Because like I told you, I was completely out of the loop, but luckily my feed is good and I have memory, right? I remember Democracy Now!, I remember Al Jazeera, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are there any more sites that you might recommend that so that we don't feel like we getting the okie doke, but we're getting information that is as nonpartisan as possible and where they might give us both sides? And is there like a good site that you recommend? Because sometimes I want to go hear the other side from their perspective. You know what I'm saying? Even though it sounds crazy, right? I want to understand what they're thinking and what they're hearing. Do you have any suggestions?
Well, I'll tell you what I've done is just kind of I'd like to do a side by side comparison. Go to candidates' websites and kind of do a side by side comparison of what their policy agendas are. I think that the League of Women Voters, which is a nonpartisan group founded by a multiracial, multi-generational group of women years ago, they provide good nonpartisan resources. Just pure, uncut. Here's what it is. Here's what this person said. Here's what this person is doing. You already mentioned Al Jazeera, which I respect, and there are a lot of news sources that people consider nonpartisan. I beg to differ. I don't think that the New York Times, Washington Post, or the Wall Street Journal are nonpartisan.
Right.
I think National Public Radio is, though. I think a lot of the investigative folks like ProPublica, even though they have kind of a more progressive bent, they do the hard work of real investigative journalism, and they give you kind of a long form understanding of what's going on. And I think any just kind of regular news source is worth looking into. Now, I encourage myself and others to go and find
first sources, primary sources,
and make decisions based on. Because I don't think people are unintelligent. I just think people are ignorant sometimes of what actually is what.
Right.
I just think in general that there's enough information on the World Wide Web for you to peruse and to come to a good conclusion about it.
I agree. I'm glad you said that because I was really being lazy. The first thing you said is go to their website. I was like, I could go to his website, huh? And just go look and see what he's saying. I have never visited Trump's website ever. Not once. Yeah.
And I also like the Black Issues Forum, which is you can find on PBS, and I also like the African American Policy Forum.
Okay.
just for information sake. Not to say that you'll find every you go on and you'll agree with everything. There's not a single source from which I think you would find 100% agreement.
Right.
Maybe you would, I think they give good enough information that all information is a good starting point for you for folks
Yeah.
to make up their own mind about stuff.
And really, you don't want to find a site where you have 100% agreement, right?
Right? No,
Because that's problematic. You want
very
a
much
site
so.
that's going to like kind of, and then you also want a site that's going to show their resources, right? At the bottom, going to kind of show where they're getting their information from, and that you can kind of click on that and go to another site, right? And kind of see
Yep.
what you want. You want a paper trail. You don't want a site that doesn't have where the information is coming from, right? That's kind of a glaring warning sign for us. Okay. Well, thank you for that. We will. I'm pretty sure I'm going to talk to you again before the election happens. Oh, there's another thing that you said that was really important, right? You said
Hmm.
if you are not registered to vote, what's the last day we can register to vote? You
In
heard
the
of-
state of Arkansas, it
Yeah.
is October 10th.
Okay, so October. All right.
Yeah.
It's the beginning of October. And then the other thing you said that was important to me because I remember when I moved to Fayetteville, I was like, okay, I can't do it online. No, you cannot do it online. Right.
Nope.
I think I filled something out with a person and my stuff still has not gotten transferred. So where would we go if we don't just find a random person with a registration thing? Right. Where would we go to physically make sure that our stuff is where it's supposed to be?
You would go uh, to the either the Secretary of State's site,
Okay.
and it's pretty easy to navigate. It has all voter information, or
Mm-hmm.
you could go to your county clerk site. So in Arkansas, I would go to the in Arkansas, in Little Rock, I would go to Pulaski County Clerk site.
Okay.
And now, mind you, by county, the sites differ. I
Okay.
would say like there, I ain't name no counties, but there's some counties they cite janky. You can't hardly find nothing on them. Fortunately, now this is another reason why elections are important too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, 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 I'm sorry, I had mind blank. Elections are important because when you elect a good county clerk like we have in Terry
Mm,
Hollingsworth, you have somebody who is actually concerned about getting out the vote and making sure people vote, making sure people have access to voter information.
okay.
Whereas in some counties, they do not care.
Yes.
And so, like either your county clerk site or the Arkansas Secretary of State site, you can navigate through it and you can find your voter information there. And I
Okay.
would encourage people, especially folks who don't vote on a regular basis,
Mm-hmm.
because there was a few years ago a purging of the voter rolls for people who don't vote, and
Mm.
people need to go back and re-register. And I say it wrong. October 10th. It's not October 10th. It's October 4th. Actually, it has
Oh,
to be 30 days before election day. So
okay.
it changes depending, of course, on when the election day is. So 30 days before election day, October 4th is the deadline for your voter registration to be postmarked or
Okay.
for it to be handed into the.
So for clarity, I can go to the Arkansas Secretary of State and register online. I don't have to register in person. I don't have to send in physical paperwork.
Nope.
Ah, okay. Good to know.
And you can go to the again, like I said, there's a voter registration application um, on the Arkansas Secretary of State's office, and more than likely, I don't know about every county clerk's office, but on the county clerk site.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. So you can so two places, your county or Arkansas State.
Yep.
Okay.
Now,
Awesome.
mind you, just to be clear, you do have to fill out a physical form.
Okay, that's all.
You
Yeah.
have- Okay, I'm sorry. You do have to physically fill out a form. There's no digital form to fill out.
That was my point. Okay, where
Yeah,
do I get the physical form if I'm
you
not
can
just seeing
get
a
that
random person on the street? Because
sos.arkansas.gov.
okay, that's what I was talking about.
Yeah,
And then so once that form comes to you, I'll have to put that back in the mail.
put it in the mail or take it to the clerk's office. Uh,
Okay, so I can take it to the county clerk's office.
yep,
Yes. And then once it's processed, I can check it on the Arkansas Treasurer of State or the county clerk office to make
yep.
sure and see where all of my voting stuff. That's the part because I was like, "What you talking about?" Because I was trying to do okay, I got to go pick it up from I got to SOS people and then mail it in or take it there physically if I want to be sure, right? Because you said there are a lot of issues with them not getting there, right? So probably taking it physically is the best decision. and then within maybe 2 weeks, I should be able to see it on there.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. So that was the part that I wanted to get out. So for those of us who and
But as
Ryan,
long as it's postmarked by October 4th,
then I'm good. Okay.
you're good to go. Yeah.
Okay. And then what Ryan just said is that if you have not been voting, several names have been purged from the list, and you might have to re-register. So you want to definitely check that before October. Yeah, you probably want to check that today, and you can check that status right now at the Arkansas Treasurer State or the county clerk office right online to see if whether or not you need to go through that registration process.
Yep.
Okay, cool, man. That's what we needed to know. We need to know if you can vote. Okay, I say. Thank you again, Ryan. Very grateful. You don't have to leave. I'm just ending the session.
All right.
See y'all.
See y'all. I do actually